I got wind of this thing back. I don't know if it even still exists, but there was a program called Futures back in the day where it was a government subsidized program where you could go into a career and you'd do an internship and the government would fund the first 4 months of your internship.
Wow.
So that actually ended up getting me into Metalworks. So I ended up doing an internship there. And things went well. I got along with the staff and I guess I did a pretty good job. And then, when my internship finished up, I went up to Alex Andronacki, who at the time was the studio manager. And I was like, hey, Alex, I'm ready to go if you want to hire me. And he was like, oh, we'd love to. But the problem is that Gil only hires from Fanshawe, which at the time was, the alliance that they had with that school. So he's like, but, Gil will get you into Fanshawe. And then once you're done, come work for us. So, sure enough, Gil was nice enough to write me a letter, sorry, because back in the day, Fanshawe was really hard to get into. I think when I applied, there was about 1,200 applicants. And they only accepted 60 of us. So his letter was definitely helpful, got me in, and then did the program there and was coming back and forth. And by the way, as a little aside, anybody that wants to get into the business, going in and volunteering from time to time is definitely a good thing to do because that's how I got my gig. So every other weekend I would come back from London, got back to the GTA, and I'd go do a session or two at Metalworks on my time. And sure enough, once my graduating year was coming up, Alex had called the school to find out who the graduates were in the top tier of the class. And they sent my name out with a couple other guys. And as soon as Alex saw my name on the list, he was just like, well, you're the dude. I mean, you've been volunteering and we know who you are. So I got picked right out of school.
That's awesome. So for people that don't know Alex Andronacki, um, I've heard rumors, and you don't know what's true or what's not, but when I was at Metalworks, so I worked with Alex as well. Awesome guy, always nice, always supportive. He actually helped me get Metallica tickets when the tour sold out instantly and I couldn't get any.
Yep.
So I'll always love the guy for that. But I remember, hanging out with Alex and not really knowing his background. And then I randomly came across an article that talked about him bringing Bob Marley to Canada at
Oh,
one point for some tours. So I thought, okay, this guy's legit. Like, it's just some dude sitting in front of me, but then you don't realize the history with Triumph and apparently Bob Marley and pretty crazy stuff.
no, for sure. Well, it's funny because a lot of the guys that ended up either teaching at the school or working at the studio are all former Triumph guys. Alex was obviously the road manager. Dave Dixon was their tech, who, is now the tech for the school and obviously for the studio. So, a lot of those guys kind of stuck around past those Triumph years and, are still doing their thing in a different form.
So Metalworks, okay, so we'll go back a little bit. So Fanshawe, you were mentioning 1,200 people applied, very hard to get in. They only took 60.
Yeah.
So not only did you get in, which is not easy to do,
Right.
but you ended up winning the Chen Merit Award. This is for technical merit.
Right.
What did it mean to you to not just, follow your passion, study what it is that you love, but to actually get acknowledged so quickly into that career?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I was super surprised because it's it was the award for the graduating class, and it was generally handed out to the guys that were at the very top of the class. And not to say that I wasn't. I mean, I did really well, but there were guys that I felt you know deserved it more than I did. But here's the thing, and it's kind of the detriment to my funding these days as well is I'm a gear pig, and all I ever would do is hang around the studio, talk about gear, look at gear, research gear. And I found out at the end of the day, that's what it was all about. It was all about showing a keen interest in, developing technologies and learning all about it. So yeah, it was really surprising and cool to be acknowledged for that. It was a good start.
You talked about the volunteering.
Mhm.
Um, Man, when I was young, I used to volunteer at everything to help out with live events, to help out at the studios, to help bands like load equipment and sell merch. And I found that was, like you mentioned, that was kind of my secret weapon. Everything I lacked in skill, everything I lacked in experience, I kind of made up for it in the contacts that I made
Mm,
along the way, and then eventually the skills I developed, and eventually the experience that I had,
sure.
and the referrals you would start to get. People would say, you know, man, that kid works so hard for nothing, for free. Imagine if we actually hired him and we paid him how hard he'd work. So,
Mhm,
like you, it ended up leading to paid gigs. And
mhm,
advice that I always got, or that I give now, is when you first start out,
mhm,
you want to say yes to everything. You want to volunteer, build that resume.
mhm.
And then once you're in demand, you're kind of where you want to be, then it's almost saying no to everything
Sure.
except for the things that you want to do. So it's nice when you finally get past that tipping point
Yeah.
where you now have options. And if you don't like country music, you can choose to just work on, you know, heavy metal music. But at the start, you better record some country bands to ever get to that place where you have choices.